Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Ben for rXis, and I am here with. Actually, I don't think I'm 100% sure how to pronounce your name. Is it RXIX or is it like Raxis?
Well, this is a funny thing because a lot of people that know me ask me this, but I say at this point, I just tell them to pronounce it however I want. But I think for me, I'll say it as rXis, like the word axis and an R in front.
Okay,
Yeah,
RXis.
yeah.
Well,
X-axis, Y-axis.
oh, yeah, true.
But
Um,
these days, I think people just call me by my actual name because
yeah,
it's kind of a weird IGN. Maybe time for IGN change, but nah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Ryan, if that's what you
Yeah.
prefer, thank you for joining me. Manager for DAF Esport, general kingmaker in the Overwatch Pacific scene in Southeast Asia. Thanks for hopping on. I'm sure you're very, very busy right now getting flights sorted and preparing to travel. When are y'all flying to Korea?
In 2 days actually, but I think Clear will be flying starting his flight tomorrow because he takes some more time because he's from the States, right? But the rest of us will be flying in on Sunday night. So actually for me it's like 2 more nights and then we just go. Yeah, so very, very soon.
Okay, yeah, so that's a good amount of time
Yep.
to prepare in Korea. I actually want to ask. So, Clear obviously is American. Was at Boise State. He said he moved to Korea for the beginning of this year or to Japan.
Okay. So there's a lot of misconceptions I would say around this. I saw a lot. So basically he already had a vacation planned to Korea before the whole OWCS or anything started. So it was just a coincidence that he was in Korea during the time of the tournament, so he could be there to play at PC cafes.
I see.
And afterwards, he had someone he could stay with in Japan. So because the flight was cheap from Korea to Japan, so he decided to go there. But because of some personal stuff, he had to go back to the States for the grand finals. So
I see.
for all our matches until the grand finals, he was either in Korea or Japan, but currently he's back in the States.
I see. He was using Varel's facility, right? I think he tweeted that.
Yeah. Yep.
Is Clear? I've heard different things on this. Is he like a Japanese dual citizen or something, or?
No, I don't think so. But he was born in Japan and he lived in Japan for quite a portion of his childhood, so he can speak Japanese. Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah.
He has roots there, but he's American.
Yeah. Okay, got it. And so how did sort of skipping a little bit on the order that I showed you earlier, but just as we're on this, so obviously Clear comes in for DAF as a replacement for R3K, who was on that team all of last year and retired. What was the process like of replacing R3K, and how did Clear come to join this team?
Okay, so I think you had another question about Lumi's role swap. So these two things, both of them are kind of interconnected. So I'll just talk about both. So originally, when R3K left, we're looking at options of tank players in the Pacific scene. So the only other reasonable option was Lumi to play tank because we had connections with him before. He was in our team long ago, not when it wasn't DAF yet. So we asked him to join us. But when OWCS was announced, I think Clear reached out to us whether he could have a tryout or is interested in playing the Pacific region because I think he has roots in Pacific, right? He was born in Japan and last year he played in APAC contenders as well. And I think with how NA and EU is this year, I think if he continued to play in NA and EU, it might be a bit more competitive. And in Pacific, there was a chance to go to LAN in Korea, right? Which is a really good opportunity to play on LAN, play on stage, especially in Korea, right? So I think he really wanted to have that opportunity to play on Korea LAN. So he was looking at options either in the Pacific region or the Japanese region. And I think he knew High Vision from before. So he reached out to Haivision, and at this point in time, iBang, which was our previous main support, he was kind of losing passion for the game, and it kind of felt like we had reached a ceiling with iBang. So we wanted to try something new. Because Lumi, as a tank player, he's already a caller, right? So we asked him if he wanted to transition to support, because I think a lot of players these days are also transitioning to support, whether it worked well or not. And even for us, in hindsight, it's kind of 50-50, maybe whether moving Lumi to main support is actually a good decision or not. But looking at it, even in hindsight, there were not many other options that we could have taken if we wanted a new main support, especially from the Pacific region. So it all kind of worked well out where Clear wanted to join, and we needed a main support, so we moved Lumi. We asked if Lumi wanted to move to main support, and he willingly agreed. Yeah.
So I guess bringing in a Korean player was never something that was never something you were interested in. That's not what your ethos is.
That can change for the future, because like when I'm talking about role swap, it's not the first time that our team role swap. And I think this is an inherent problem of the Pacific region, whether Pacific, Japan, or even OC before, where the local player base is very small. And for me, I think because you can only have 2 imports, so the best team would still rely on having the best core of local players, right? But sometimes there isn't enough local players to fill a specific role, so we have to think outside the box. I think last year Ace played a lot of roles for us. Ace is actually the hit scan player, right? But even this year he's playing flex DPS. And before he played like tank for us, he played some flex support in double flex support comps. So I think that's just the nature of Pacific or the smaller regions in general. Like you see last year how Honeypot shifted color hacks to flex support out of necessity, right? So it's just how the way these smaller regions work because of our small talent pool. And about the Korean thing, I think when this team formed, we were more of a friendship team, and I think one of our visions was to make like the best possible Pacific teams which could be competitive with other regions. I mean, looking at how the trend of the region is going, it might come to a point in the future where we have to take Korean players out of necessity, but because we didn't have the time, I think integrating Korean players, especially if you're a team that really wants to win, is much more than just picking them up, because you have to think about the language issue, right? And like culture wise, how it works out and their mindset. Because some Korean players, maybe they just come to Japan or Pacific to get the free bag, right? The free money. And we don't want these type of players. We want the players who are like hungry to prove themselves. So getting Koreans is a possibility for the future, but just for so far, we just didn't really have a good opportunity to integrate any Korean player. Yeah.
Yeah, and like obviously you have players like Niang on Honeypot, who's Korean, but is played in
the
he's
Australian
he's an honorary Australian at this point, I'm sure, right?
Soggy.
Yeah. Isn't Soggy Singaporean?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's nasty. He kind of destroyed you guys in Pacific Grand Finals. That was kind of crazy. He's very good.
I think every season that Soggy has won in Australia or even now in Pacific, he was the Grand Finals MVP. So maybe something about Grand Finals, man, he just cannot.
He's sort of the anti post contenders Hydron. my apologies to so like speaking of DPS players, you guys have a player that I've heard described as sort of the next Patapan waiting in the wings to turn old enough to compete. So how excited should we be for Yoshinori 2K?
This analogy with the next Palipan is funny because I've seen people say Ace Haivision is the next Palipan, any of them is the next Palipan, combine next Palipan.
Yeah.
But I think to compare like someone to another person doesn't give them like enough justice. And
yeah, of course.
Yoshi was a very hot prospect, and he kind of proved himself, right? But last year our team was really strong because we had a DPS trio of Ace, High Vision, and Yoshi, and all their hero pools kind of are a bit different but kind of intersect with each other, right? So I think any team that played us, it was really hard to prepare against us because you wouldn't know which of the three DPS players we can play. Because High Vision and Ace, they can both hit scan. Yoshi and Ace can both kind of flex DPS. Even High Vision has additional flexibility in his hero pool.
Yoshi plays like Genji, Echo, like that kind of,
But Yoshi is more of a tracer specialist, and he's definitely by far was the best tracer in our DPS lineup. And in Overwatch 2, tracer is really, really important hero, right? You can probably get away with being a tracer one trick. And that's why I think Ace is traditionally not a tracer player. So it's kind of a challenge this year for him to transition to being the main tracer player, which I think he has done well. But our strength of our team last year really relied a lot, our explosiveness and our playstyle relied a lot about the fact that we could easily rotate the three DPS players whenever. And I think Yoshi not being eligible this year kind of hurt our team's power level a bit. And Yoshi is he's a young player, and when he first came into our team, he had some maybe problems with some maybe like mental blockage where he wasn't confident in his own skills. But he's a very hardworking player, and I'm sure you saw last year he was the back-to-back grand finals MVP, right, on Tracer. And I think he's a mechanically very, very good Tracer. He understands the role very well because now in Overwatch 2, Tracer is less about just going for a backline. Tracer kind of feels that Overwatch 1 D.Va playstyle where it's a lot about map control, payload control, angle control, and I think Yoshi does that really well. He's not just a Tracer who just goes in for kills. He understands his role very well, and I think that is why Yoshi is very, very good. And I'm really looking forward to next year if Pacific is still a region. Hopefully that he'll be able to play. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the schedule exactly. Forgive me for that. But would he be, if you were to make the stage 2 Asia main event, would he be 17 by that point, or would it be after that?
Unfortunately, not, because the roster lock rules are that you have, because for Asia, I mean, I think the community probably been through this with the whole EXO. The roster lock rules for Asia is that your roster is locked through the whole stage, right?
You have to be 17 before that.
Open qualifiers, regional OWCS, and LAN. So you have to be 17 before the open qualifiers, which unfortunately, because his birthday is in October, so he will still be ineligible next stage, unfortunately.
Yeah. Speaking of, well, at first, actually, I think Patapan might actually be the wrong comparison. I think the player that I think is kind of most comparable to what you're describing is actually Tree from North America, in the sense that it's a player who, them being so young and not eligible to compete in certain competitions, like, has drastic impacts on rosters. I mean, you know, Tree and Vega, being as young as they are, have shaped so many things in North American Overwatch. I can say that. And secondly, I want to kind of, going off your point about roster lock, I have two questions. One is hyper specific. The other is kind of more general. The really specific one is, so I remember when the whole thing with OUA esport and them getting disqualified, and 321 diving comes in to take the spot. I remember 321 diving having a different roster in Pacific Open qualifiers. They had like Erikek for and then they get invited to take OUA's spot after they get disqualified, and they bring in 2 Korean players who were eliminated in Korean Open qualifiers. Were they just given like an exception due to the unique circumstances?
Okay, actually, after the open qualifiers, you have a 2-day window to change your roster. And after that 2-day window, it's locked right all the way until the Dallas major.
Right, because that's how Poker Face did it.
But the thing is, 321 diving initially didn't qualify. They only notified that they were going to play like maybe a few days before the first week of games, right? So they had actually had extra time to get new players. And because at that point, because they have already been eliminated, I think every CAC and level 1 group went to get other opportunities in NA and EU. And I think, I don't know whether they mind me saying this, but I think every CAC and level 1 group was already planning to leave the team after open qualifiers. But I think it worked out really, really well for them.
Oh, yeah.
If you watch the game, Sungan and Petals were definitely 2v-fying at some points in the matches, man.
Yeah.
They really lucked out on getting
Petals is pretty crazy. I think Petals single-handedly set back Hong Kong and Taiwanese Overwatch generations with that match.
They're definitely the most surprising team.
Absolutely, yeah. And like speaking of kind of the format a bit, so obviously Pacific has a very different format from Korea and Japan. They put you guys straight into a double elimination bracket instead of Korea and Japan, which had this regular season and then an LCQ and a seeding decider and then playoffs, and it's all very long. You guys, I kind of got the short end of the stick.
Yeah.
What did you think of the format? Would you have preferred something more like Korea and Japan with more broadcast exposure, more matches? Or are you like, do you kind of prefer the bracket format, possibly?
I think there's two perspectives you can look at this, from a player's perspective and from WDG's perspective, right? Because but first of all, I want to say that I think Pacific's format is indeed too short, but I think Japan and Korea's is just too long also. There's too many matches.
I agree.
I think for Korea, you can give it a reason because a lot of the matches are really entertaining. You can say Korea is the tier 1, the highest level of watch, so people want to watch those games. But for Japan to use the same format where they have 50 plus matches in the season, and it's just like, let's say like the 9th place team versus the 7th place team again and again, I think people start to get bored of that. But
you get bored watching Namakuchi brothers play a Rise project for the 4th time?
Well, I mean, I barely watch Japan, so I mean, but I think I talked to WGs, like from a business perspective, it's hard to get Pacific more time because Korea is the biggest shareholder out of the three, because they probably earn the most direct revenue from Korea because of ticket sales, and the Korean teams are probably the priority for them, being a Korean company, and Koreans are the strongest in the whole world probably, so you probably want to prioritize them. So they have 3 match days. And Japan is a growing, very booming region in terms of viewership for Overwatch.
Huge viewership.
These 2 years. And last year, WG saw that opportunity and they instantly put in investment, even from last year to now. And it panned out well for them, right? So you can't say them giving Japan more priority than Pacific was a bad move, because it really went out well. So it just leaves us in the awkward position where, as competitors in our region, we really want more playtime, but it's hard to ask for, because WG streams 7 days a week. 3 days for Korea, 3 days for Japan, and 1 day Pacific. What you could say is maybe next time they can have 2 days of Japan and 2 days for Pacific to even things out. But I think to them, Pacific hasn't shown that level of viewership or the reason to get like return on investment for them to put in more resources, because the fact that we even have a Pacific region is already good, considering the state of the Overwatch ecosystem right now. Like OCE doesn't even have a region, right? But from a player's perspective, it's bad, because if, let's say you're a Japanese team, okay, let's say you're a Rise project, right? You play at a minimum 8 regular seasons games. As long as you're not last, you still get to play last chance qualifier. Let's say you just get eliminated in the second round, you play 2 more games. So on average, even if you're a more bottom team, you play at like 10 to 11 best of 5s. In Pacific, if you're at the same level, like the top 6 team, you play 3 best of 5s within like 3 weeks, and you're out, and you have nothing to do until August. So I think Rush tweeted how the Korean players have no jobs until August, but it's even worse for Pacific, because you don't even have an opportunity to play, to get officials experience. And this is why I think if this continues, and this is just a direct result of more investment to Japan, right? I think before, I can confidently say last year that Pacific SEA was a stronger, more competitive region than Japan. But this year, I think it's starting to change, because Japan has so many officials. Even the weaker teams have so many games to play. And the more games you play, the more officials experience you have. Because scrims and officials are very different, right? Sometimes you don't get to scrim a lot. But officials, you learn a lot from it. You can improve much more faster from playing officials than scrims. Like Teenage Rising, they played 2 matches. They got rolled by Honeypot, and I forgot they played.
They took a map off
diving.
Honeypot.
Yeah.
They took a map off Honeypot in 3-2-1 diving and got 8th, and
so
other teams, you know.
Okay, you could probably say the Teenage are the up and coming prospects of the region, right? Tier 3 players from last year who didn't get a chance, but this year they could qualify. But after just losing 2 matches, 2 best of 3s, maybe they improve from week 1 to week 2. Maybe you give them another week, they might improve more, but they don't get the opportunity. And what are they doing now? They're just doing nothing until August. So I think that is really the biggest problem in the Pacific. So I think like a group stage really solves that because you get a minimum amount of games that you play. But right now, with how they plan the 3-3-1 system, it's really hard for them to have anything more than that. So
would you I'm gonna float 2 just alternate ideas that I think if I'm thinking like if I was WDG, right, like how I would try and kind of, you know, square this circle. Option 1 could be if they wanted to keep it as a bracket, would you prefer it? Do you think it'd be better if it was sort of got its own week? Say between the regular seasons of Korea and Japan and their playoffs, we do Pacific tournament in 1 week, kind of like contenders in the past, where it was just the bracket was like all week. That has its pros and cons, obviously. I think it would be easier for viewers to follow because it's like you'd be able to follow everything much more proximate time. The other thing, and I'm just sort of like thinking like what WDG would do. This might be how ESL Face It would do it with how they've been kind of showing broadcasting games. But if they were to, you know, do a group stage and not broadcast all the matches, say, from your perspective, I guess the question is like, what do you think is more important? Getting more matches in or getting more exposure? Not that they're mutually exclusive, but like kind of.
I think matches are one thing, but I think if we talk about tournament, exposure is way better. Because if you want to say a match you can just play scrims, right? Scrims aren't broadcaster either. But the first system is bad because that means you're spending so much time just to prepare for 1 week. You're putting too much importance on 1 week, which can be very pressuring for the teams. And look at how the patch cycle is for Overwatch now. They just
true.
That 1 week you mess up. It's too much pressure on that 1 week. But I mean, so I think exposure is definitely more important. And the whole point is you want consistent games, even for viewers, right? Even if you say it's easier to follow, I think as a viewer, I think having just a tournament in 1 week through half a year is very bad because you want consistent games.
Yeah.
Especially if there are actually fans of Pacific Overwatch who want to see the Pacific region consistently. Just having 1 week is very bad. But I think this is the best they could have done with the 3-3-1 system. What I can hope for, which might not happen because honestly Japan is kind of overtaking us too much right now in terms of viewership and sponsorship, is that they make Japan have less games and give 1 broadcast day to Pacific for like a 2-2-3 split, and Japan and Pacific can have the same shorter format compared to Korea. But I have to say, like, I think this is not because I think it's a trend these days to like shit on admins, right, with NA and EU. But I have to say, WG are really like one of the best TOs I've experienced. I think all their admins are. I think one thing that they really have is they know the scene well, and their admins really have a lot of passion for Overwatch. They really want to make the product really good. And I think you can see even with way less resources, right, they have done a lot more than Face It, in my opinion. Even you want to see the OWCS Korea lens, they have so many things for fans. Like they have the free gifts, the things, the fan signs, the fan meets, a lot of content for fans, a lot of like fan interaction. So I think they're really doing very good job. And
the coach interviews before the matches have been amazing for shit talk and some interesting outfit choices by certain coaches.
I hope they do it for Asia.
Yeah.
Do it.
Not a mushroom.
I don't think he has confidence to speak English in an interview, so maybe I'll.
Oh yeah, true.
But yeah, I think WG has been really good, and they've been honest and open about it. How I think they themselves know that they're doing specific kind of injustice, but it's how the way the budget works, right? You can't possibly say that Pacific and Japan deserves equal amount of investment, right? Because we have not. I guess you could say if you put investment, there might be more fans, more viewers, because there is an interest in esports in SCA, right? You can see that in Valorant. But I think right now, it is a no-brainer to put more into Japan. It's just a bit unfair for us. But I guess that's just how it works. It's still better to have something rather than nothing.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting you bring up Valorant because something I've noticed is obviously Valorant has been very successful in Southeast Asia. I mean, PaperX, like, enough said. But something I've found was interesting is there seems to be a concentration of Thai and Singaporean players kind of are most of the top SEA players in Overwatch. In some other games, you see more players from like Indonesia, the Philippines, Malaysia, etc. I'm just curious if like you have any ideas on what factors kind of influence the prevalence of those two countries specifically. Does it have anything to do with like socioeconomic factors or like game preference, or like what are the causes of that?
I think there's a lot of smaller factors that go into this. So first of all, you cannot deny that Singapore is kind of an outlier in SEA because we are kind of more developed financially. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people have more access to PC gaming. But you have to take in consideration that Valorant came out in 2020, right? When PC gaming was developing rapidly in those regions. Overwatch came out in 2016. And when the game first came out, that's when the interest most comes out, right?
Right.
When Overwatch came out in 2016, the countries like Indonesia and Philippines, PC esports or PC gaming in general was probably still not as developed, or as there still wasn't that much interest because a lot of people didn't have access to these devices, right? Mm-hmm. But Thailand has more PC gaming background, and other than those like social economic factors of when the game was released compared to now, I think it's also where Blizzard had investment in, because even with how dead Overwatch is now, Blizzard did have a lot. There's a lot of hype with Overwatch back then. There was investment from Blizzard, but but you have to see within SCA, the two countries where they had the most investment is, especially in terms of esports, was Thailand and Singapore. Mm-hmm. Back then, as a Singaporean, I can tell you, back then in like 2017, there was basically a LAN tournament every 1 or 2 months. And there was a lot of players. It really grew the player base. Of course, now it's a shell of its former self. There are basically no LANs anymore. But it was the same in Thailand, right? And Thailand is actually growing now, because last year there was Thailand contenders, right?
Mm-hmm. That was really cool that like that happened. I never would have imagined that we saw that.
Even though the level of play in that tournament was really low, it sparked a lot of interest. There was now in the open qualifier for this specific, there's only like maybe 20 teams, right? I don't know the exact number, but maybe around there. And that includes more countries in Thailand. The Thailand open qualifier for their contenders itself, it was like 200 teams. It was like 100 plus, I forgot. But it was a lot.
That's really awesome.
It's sometimes like these teams, they don't want to take part because they know they will not make it to the next stage. But for Thailand contenders, it was an open ballpark, right? You could get in. It's very like the level of play wasn't that high. Any team could just make it and get in, and there's consistent games, consistent streams in Thai language as well. And Thailand has a lot of influencers, right? They have a lot of streamers. They're like Aputo, Titawat. They're big streamers in Overwatch at a Thai level. Of course, they're not as big as like J3 or Emong, but the market size in Thailand is smaller, right?
Yeah.
So you can't compare to like that. But if you have those content creators, it kind of sparks more interest in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So compared to Indonesia or Philippines, there's not a lot of personalities in the scene. And the esports, there was no tournaments or much opportunities for them. There's a lot of opportunities for Thai players, not just like Pacific regional tournaments, but a lot of local tournament opportunities for Thai players and Singaporean players back in the day, which kind of developed the skill gap to get wider, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think actually it was even worse back then. At the peak of Pacific contenders in 2019, there were basically zero Indonesian, zero Filipino, basically zero other SA countries that weren't Thai or Singaporean tier 2, right? But at the very least now, in a sort of more open format where there's less sponsorship, there's less orgs, you can actually see some Indonesian and Filipino players coming up,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like especially with the World Cup last year, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So speaking of like coming up, like who do you think is sort of like, you know, next up in Pacific in terms of players that, you know, fans should kind of be keeping their eye on for stage 2 this summer and in the future?
I mean, they're definitely like insane players. They're like Sungan or Battles, but they're Korean, right? So maybe I'll not talk about them. If you want to talk purely on a Pacific player standpoint, let me try. I was thinking to try to give one for each role, but I think Tank is a bit hard. I don't think there's anyone for Tank. For DPS, I think Speed 75. I think he's kind of like Yoshinori like 3 years ago. Like his mechanics are at a level, but he still doesn't really understand how to play in a team, like his Tracer's role in a team. And when you talk about next up players in Pacific, like let's say you talk about next up players in NA and EU, right? In EU, there's players like Gala, NA, there are players like Rocket and Chopper. Those players can compete with the best right now, right at this instance. But I think even the next up players in Pacific, there's still kind of a skill gap between those players and the established players, like players from Honeypot or DAF. But I think one player is Speed, because he's definitely the definition of next up. Because you can talk about players like Joe, right, like the 3-2-1 diving players, Joe, Me Machine, but they've been playing for years, right? But Speed, his first tournament was last year in World Cup for Indonesia, and his first contender season he placed 4th, and he's a player with a lot of mechanical potential.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was kind of unfortunate how FES plays this season and the way they got out. But I think purely on the next up player with the most potential I see in the future is probably Speed. It's just whether he can have a team that can develop him further.
Mm-hmm.
Because as you mentioned before, with how the thing is, right? It's like you see how DAF has a Thai core, Honeypot has a Singaporean core, but Speed is like a Indonesian, right? And from what I know, his English isn't that great either, so it might be hard for him to get as many opportunities. But certainly, I think he's one of the players who's definitely next up. Let me think for support. Okay. Wait, let me check Wikipedia 1 sec. You know,
I can throw out a name. What's his name? Savior from Teenage Rising. I thought was pretty impressive. The support player.
He didn't play a map though.
Oh wait, I'm thinking who was the support player?
Me Machine.
There was somebody.
Hazi.
Somebody on Teenage Rising. I forget. Maybe I'm mixing up who it was.
Say Sunset, right? The DPS player.
That's the one. Yeah, mixed up the S words. He was yeah. Sunset. I was kind of impressed by in Teenage Rising. Because I also thought they kind of got. I thought they got.
I feel like Teenage, yes, they are up and coming, but I wouldn't say that they still haven't like hit the place where they are competitive. After all, there is still a large skill gap between even the 4th place team and the last place, and Teenage are still like they were last place.
Yeah.
Right? So
I think they got a little bit unlucky with the side of the bracket they were on, because I think they would have beaten.
But I think their highest skill cap. Okay, out of the 3 other Thai teams, Personate, Fate, and Teenage, I would definitely say Teenage are the best out of the 3.
Yeah.
Okay, but when you talk about this discussion about players to watch out for, it's kind of ironic because I feel like a lot of teams in this region rely on the Koreans to carry them, right? RTFM relies Ruler and on Jinsung.
You think so?
Yes.
I'm a big Kurumi fan. Ever since IRP told me about him before World Cup, and I was like, who is this guy? And then I watched World Cup finals, and I was like, or the World Cup group stage, and I was like, he's nasty.
He's very inconsistent.
Yeah, he's one of those hit scan players.
If you watch the lower finals where they got eliminated, Kurumi like wasn't on the kill feed at all. Like,
yeah,
honestly, like to be honest, he like got hard cap. I think RTFM, the player to I think has potential is Hope. I think Hope is a really smart DPS player. He's quite flexible. He's not a very mechanical DPS player, but he's smart, and he's been around for quite some time. That's why I wouldn't put him in a next up discussion. Because if you're maybe this can be more of a players people might not think about that are worth looking at. Not really a next up discussion because I feel like there aren't that many. Like, what would you consider next up, right? Like, Meme Machine can be considered next up, but can he really be? Because if he's playing the game, like if you look at his Wikipedia, he's been playing since 2020, right?
Right.
So I think on a purely next up level, there's only Speed because he's actually the only like really new player.
Right. He's young, I assume, right?
But some players that I think are more underrated, not in the top 2 DAF Honeypot, the clear, obvious good players. I think Hope is one of them. He's a really smart player. Because I feel like he's probably the strongest part of the DPS trio for RTFM. Because I think Xiao Lian, his hero pool is very small. He's good on the heroes that he's good at, which is like Genji. Other than that, not really. And Kurumi is still very, very inconsistent in my opinion. I think Meme Machine, actually, for a lot of people meme on Meme Machine because of his name, and he was like a brick one trick before in the scene. So, but I think this season he was really hardworking because I'm personally friends with him. He's really hardworking. He votes himself a lot. He tries to study the game a lot, and you can see that, right? No one really expected 3-1 to go anywhere, but even you want to take out Petals and Sungan, really, you want to give the excuse Petals and Sungan really hard carry them. Their team still managed to get top 3, right? And yeah, I think 3-1 are probably the players, up and coming players.
Yeah. I think we could have a whole we could probably have a whole conversation about
I feel like
some of the things.
Skill gap is still very far even within the region. I don't know.
I was gonna say I feel like we could have a whole conversation about some of the things that might have gone wrong for RTFM, but I think that would take us far too long. So I want to look a little bit kind of out of Pacific and look ahead a little bit to what you have coming up next with DAF, and that is the LAN in Korea. So first question: Do you guys scrim Korean teams?
Well, we try to, but I think, like, to be brutally honest, there is. I mean, everyone knows this. There's still a clear skill gap between. Like, you want to talk about the non-Korean teams, definitely like Honeypot, Dev, Vero, very in a tier, right? Insomnia, I think, is still kind of not.
Yeah.
But even within us 3 of our teams, I think it's safe to say, because I've talked to the managers for both their team, we don't really get the Korean scrims that much because there is still a large skill gap, even between top 6 like Genesis or Simply. There's still a large skill gap between us and those tier of teams. So we want to book them, but the Korean teams don't really like want to book us because they would rather, like, let's say you're a top 4 Korean team, they will just like the 4 Korean teams in the land right now, they're just scrimming within themselves, right? Because it's not really like any incentive for them to scrim bigger teams. So it's kind of hard. The only time we can really book them is, let's say, if they are looking for a warm-up, they need help with an easier opponent to help them warm up. So we have helped some teams warm up. Like, we have scrimmed like teams like Runaway, Yeti, and before, but not very often because normally we plan our scrims in advance, right? So they would rather just scrim the Korean teams unless they have like last minute cancel. They really need a scrim, and then we have a block open, then we'll scrim them. But usually no. Actually we there's one team we scrimmed a lot is Vesta Crew. But I think Vesta Crew are not really on the same level as the Koreans.
When if you're allowed to share this, when you scrim Vesta Crew, like how do you usually do against them? Because I think this because this is a conversation that I think people have a lot, is like, okay, we're gonna see DAF, Varel, and Honeypot go against like Falcons and Crazy Raccoon. Like it's it can be tough to extrapolate like that compared to maybe a more average opponent, or even like EMEA and NA. Like I've heard people, it's very, I think people kind of have no idea how to kind of compare the teams in Japan and Pacific to like how would DAF do against like Timeless or Peps or like EXO, like teams like that. Do you ever scrim teams in North America or Europe, or is the ping just unworkable?
I mean, when Saudi E-League was a thing, we sometimes scrim with Rock, with Checkmate Izaki, because at the time their Koreans were still in Korea, and Saudi gets decent ping to Singapore server, and the time zone is not that bad. So we actually scrim pre-season. We actually scrimmed Rock quite a lot, and it was kind of like 50-50 or so. Both of us could take maps off each other.
Okay.
But Rock, I think right now, if you want to talk about like EU has like the big three, NA has like Toronto Timeless, I think we definitely can't compete with those caliber of teams. Like we as in like the tier of DAF, Honeypot, Varel. Because I think, well, like within DAF, Honeypot, Varel, right now in the conditions of the current team, there are definitely like, you could say like Honeypot is better than DAF and we're better than Varel. But I think overall, like any given day, like we could probably take maps on each other. So we are kind of considered the same tier. But I think that tier of teams would probably be somewhere, if you put them, like just chuck them in NAEU, I think it will be the middle of the pack for NAEU. Like we definitely cannot, right now at power level, we definitely cannot compete, like even at a macro strategy wise or understanding of the game wise, we cannot compete with the top dogs of NAEU. But I think middle of the pack is
middle of the pack of the top 16 or middle of the pack of top 8? Like
top 8.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Like you saw, like, okay, I'll just give you an example. Like Team France last year lost to Team Japan, right?
Right.
The Team France players, like on the aggregate level, they would probably consider like middle of EU contenders, right? And Team Japan won them. But when Team Japan faced like the Saudi, they didn't have an answer at all. They had no answers. It looked like
they looked better. That was the I'm thinking of a different series when it was Japan it was Saudi USA that was decently close. No, do you remember KSG canceling Poco's Flux in like midair? That was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Anyway, so I think hopefully this kind of gives people a sense of like how you guys sort of view yourselves.
But comparing to the Korean teams is a different beast, because I think Korea is like, you want to say Korea, the top Korean teams might be competitive with top of EU and NA, but that's because the top of EU NA, there's a large skill gap between the top and the middle of EU NA.
Right.
But Korea, like the top 4 versus like the bottom 4 aside from Vesta, the skill gap I think isn't as large, So I think Korea is still overall a much better region. There's a lot more competitive teams, and I think the Honeypot, DAF, Varel, this tier of team will go to Vesta Crew level. Maybe a bit better if you trust under the same system. And you have to remember, this is a bit of cope. But when we scrim Korean teams, we're always on 100 plus ping.
Right.
Our region, like SEA, we never ever have a scrim where we're on no ping.
Yeah.
So one thing that we always look forward to when we go to Korea, oh my god, we finally get to scrim on the same ping as the Koreans,
Even when you're playing in regional competition in Pacific, is everybody usually on like a moderate amount of ping?
You know why? Because they always set minimum latency. Which is a bit like, okay, it's a bit dumb in my opinion, because all the teams like have the imports, right? Korean imports. And because they ask all the teams to give the ping that each player have, they'll up the minimum latency to the ping that the Korean get. So even if we play Singapore server, the minimum latency in the setting of the custom game is set to 80.
Mm.
So I think the only match in the entire bracket that can be said that there's no minimum latency is probably Fate versus Person in Gang. But that's not really a real match, is it? It's kind of mouse. The rest of the matches, definitely, I think at least 70 or 80 ping.
That's interesting. I think a lot of people probably would not have known that. Obviously, like in the past, there was a wider array of like sort of tier 2 and tier 3 Korean teams that teams in Pacific and Japan could scrim. Now, from what I've heard bits and pieces of, it's like, you know, even in the OWCS Open qualifiers, a lot of the Korean players were like, I'm not even gonna, or a lot of the like sort of, you know, lower tier 2, tier 3 Korean players were like, I'm not even gonna bother like signing up because I know I'm not gonna make it. And there aren't really that many other competitions for them to play in. Do you think that kind of drain of the sort of lower end Korean scene, like, were those teams in the past good scrim partners, and like has the lack of those like hurt your scrim quality at all, or is it not really a factor?
100%. I can confidently tell you that this year our scrim quality is way worse than last year. And even, okay, let's say last year, even the top Korean OD teams are good scrim partners for most of the SCA teams.
Right.
Korean contenders, and honestly, Korean contenders was way stronger than us last year also. So even the bottom Korean contenders teams were really good scrim opponents. But where are those players now? They are not playing, they're not scrimming. We can't find those same scrims anymore. Last year we had OCE contenders.
Mm-hmm.
So many teams that are good scrim partners. Last year we were scrim partners, we were consistent scrim partners with teams like Honeypot, Ground Zero, like the top 3 OCE teams, right? Really good scrim partners. Even back then, we'll go further back, we had Chinese contenders.
Yeah.
Chinese contenders were like, it's like around the same level, if not a bit stronger than Pacific. Really good scrim partners. How many teams? So many teams. We had OCE, China teams, bottom Korean teams. All three are gone now. Mm-hmm. So who are we left scrimming with? Ourselves and Japanese teams, which are, if you are a top team like us, basically we are either getting rolled by Koreans in scrims or we are rolling our own region in scrims. Mm-hmm. So there's very, very good scrims. The only good scrims you can probably find are like Vero and Honeypot, but Honeypot, like, because we don't really want to scrim the same opponents that we are going to play soon, right?
Right.
So most time we're just scrimming like Vero, Insomnia, Japanese teams, or maybe like the FES, RTFM. But now, when preparing for this LAN, who are we going to scrim? All the teams that are eliminated are not going to scrim now, right? They're taking a break. So
I guess there's the OC Face It League teams.
Yes, but those teams aren't really scrimming.
Yeah, no, I'm just throwing out there.
Yeah.
No, that is that's really difficult for you. I know you did that sort of scrim, the sort of show match scrim with No Hill's like Chinese team.
Yeah.
I didn't get a chance to watch that, I think, because of the timing, but hopefully with the Chinese servers coming back, that'll bring, although like it's like who knows how many Chinese players are actually going to come back. Hopefully a lot.
Like back then in 2019, I think it was like when the peak of contender scrim quality was insane. You didn't even like teams. You just block out the entire region. Like a Pacific contenders team in 2019 would not scrim any other Pacific contenders team to hide strat because we had the luxury. We could, because we can scrim Australia, we can scrim China, we can scrim Korea. Same with OC. OC teams wouldn't scrim each other to hide strats. China teams as well, because there's so much scrims. But now we have come to a point where there's like the scrim quality is so bad. I mean, obviously the scrim quality is insane for the top 4 Korean teams, much more than NAU. But for the minor regions like us, we can't find scrims at all, like any quality scrims. So it's really, really bad.
Is the ping what's the ping from like the Singapore server to like a West Coast US team? It's like 180, or is it more than that?
180, but you have to consider that
time zones, right?
Thai players will get more ping and time zones.
Right. So is that basically unworkable, essentially?
Yeah, I don't think so.
No, that makes sense. That's fair.
And also, it's like, why would NA and EU teams want to scrim us when they can just scrim NA EU teams on lower ping as well.
Yeah.
It's the same quality.
Like, doing clear a favor. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, you have a very tough task ahead of you next week. I believe that Ace will gap proper. I'm manifesting it.
Hey man, if both can win proper, maybe Ace can.
So true. Believe in the power of Trick Room.
They have the GOAT of Lucio Chio, and we have a off-tank player playing Lucio.
Yeah, I actually thought Lumi's Lucio looked mechanically pretty solid. But
still, I don't. Probably nowhere near Chio.
Yeah, you got to go into it with I have no idea what the meta is currently. I don't know. I don't even know if you know. But
okay, I think it's the same because I don't think this season's patch changed a lot.
Yeah.
Like the biggest change was the ball, but like I don't think it'll be that. I think the only teams that'll play ball is like the teams with ball players.
Right.
So actually 3 of the Korean teams, but I don't think the ball change is gonna put him up to like OP level. So
doesn't Dank have a really good ball, if I recall?
Well, thing is, you wouldn't want to take a dive mirror against Koreans, so
true. What is your, and I want to be respectful of your time, so I'll try and keep this quick, but how do you even prepare to play a team like Falcons? What's the sort of mindset you have to go in to even kind of be ready to put up a fight?
I mean, to be brutally honest, it's just a warm up for the lower bracket. But I think in Flash Ops last year, we played Hamster as well, right? We also played O2 Plus. I think you just gotta take it you will probably not have a chance to win, but if you even win fights, if you even win rounds, that's already a success because nobody, no viewer or no team expects you to even take any rounds of these teams, right?
Right.
So if you do that, that's already considered a success, something no one expect. And
I guess you almost have to do you almost have to kind of ignore the names on the other team and just be they're just
probably.
They're just normal players.
There's a certain factor when you see the names of the other team, you start to get nervous, start to get scared, right?
Right.
When we just play our teams that we know, we're very confident because we know we can win them. But even last year in Flash Ops, versus the Korean teams, we tend to a lot of times you tend to panic, you tend to overthink, right? You tend to overthink outs, you tend to overthink positioning, you overthink a lot of things that end up messing you up. Yeah. You know what's funny though? You know if we go to lower bracket, who are we gonna play against? We're gonna play against Vero.
That'll be exciting.
But you know what's funny is last year, every single season, our goal is to win Vero because we're gonna meet them in grand final. We went to Flash Ops. Blizzard put us in the same group as Vero for some reason. So our goal was to win Vero again. And this year, our goal is to win Vero again because we are probably not gonna win a Korean team. So
it's the eternal rivalry.
Yeah. But you know what? Vero are first seed, we're second. So you know what? I'll say Vero are the favorites.
I
do not put too much pressure on ourselves.
That's very fair.
Of course, I'm still confident that we're gonna win. But you know what? I see Reddit and Twitter sometimes. I think people are overhyping Vero too much. I saw comments that said Yeti and Vero will be a banger. There is zero way that is gonna be a banger. It's just gonna be a trio. Mark my words.
I will write that down. Yeah, I mean, I think people are very excited to see y'all.
Japan is to be one of the most overhyped region this year.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that is because of what we were talking about before about people see it more.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for your time. Good luck going to Korea. You guys are going to do great. We'll all be rooting for you here. And yeah, anything else you want to plug?
Yep. Follow us on Twitter at DAF_OW, and we'll try our best to take down the Korean Goliaths.
You know, Goliath loses in the end. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CryXGG, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, share it with your friends and enemies, share it with Proper to demoralize him, all that sort of stuff. And we'll see y'all soon. Proper, more like Flopper. Thank y'all so much for watching.